My name is Helen Carter, and for most of my adult life, I believed I was happily married. I remember the day it all started to unravel the sunlight, spilling across the bedroom floor, our youngest giggling from under the covers, and Michael downstairs humming some old tune while making coffee. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. From the inside, I felt content, steady, safe. But I was wrong. That afternoon, I was sorting through mail on our shared desk when I found an envelope. It wasn't addressed, just a folded piece of stationery tucked beneath utility bills. Curious, I opened it. The handwriting was delicate, undeniably feminine. I love you more than I should. I wish I could tell Helen the truth, but I'm scared. Helen. My name. I felt my chest tighten. My hands shook as I looked down at the bottom of the note. May 24, 2009, our wedding day. My heart started to pound. My mouth went dry. Whoever wrote this, they were with my husband on our wedding day, confessing their love for him, and afraid of me finding out. My mind began to spin. A face came to mind immediately. David Michael's younger brother. He had always been around. Family dinners, Christmas mornings, late-night drinks with Michael in the garage. I remembered his glances, the inside jokes, the casual touches that I had dismissed as affectionate brotherly love. Now I wasn't so sure. I slipped the note into my robe pocket and made my way downstairs. Michael smiled at me, cup of coffee in hand. "What's wrong?" he asked. I sat across from him at the kitchen table, the world suddenly unfamiliar. My voice wouldn't come. My eyes just searched his face for something. Anything that would tell me this was all a misunderstanding. But all I saw was calm. And in that moment, I realized the real storm hadn't even started yet. That night, sleep evaded me. I lay in bed next to Michael, our bodies inches apart but our souls miles away. His breathing was steady, peaceful even. Mine, shallow and erratic. I kept replaying that note in my head. Every curve of the handwriting, every haunting word. I wish I could tell Helen the truth. How long had this lie been festering beneath the surface of our lives? How many smiles had he offered me while harboring a secret like this? The betrayal wasn't just in the act. It was in the ease with which he hid it. I stared at the ceiling and felt the weight of a truth I didn't yet understand. The next morning, I tried to go about my routine. I packed our daughter's lunch, answered emails, even watered the plants in our sunroom. But I was detached, my motions mechanical. Like someone had pressed play on a tape of me and walked away. I was haunted by the unknown. Was it a one-time thing? An old flame that never quite extinguished? Or worse, was it still happening? I knew one thing. I had to find out. I started digging, quietly. Michael had always been meticulous, but no one is perfect. I remembered an old laptop he used before switching to his work-issued one. It was collecting dust in the basement. That evening, after he left for his weekly poker night with David and a few of his friends, I went looking. I powered it on, expecting to find a locked screen or corrupted files, but instead, it lit up with ease. The background was a picture of the four of us. Michael, me, our daughter, and David, smiling at some lake house trip 3 summers ago. The image made my stomach turn. I went straight to the email client. Most of the inbox was cluttered with spam or promotions. But there was one folder tucked beneath everything labeled simply, Memories. I clicked it. My screen filled with dozens of emails, all from one address, davidjournaloldmail.com. Each message dated months apart, some spanning years. I opened the oldest one first. She doesn't know. She still sees me as her brother-in-law, not the man who's been in love with you since college. My heart dropped. I opened another. You said this would end, that we would stop, that Helen would never be hurt. But we can't keep lying to her. A ringing filled my ears. I couldn't believe what I was reading. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a hidden life. A love story playing out in the shadows of my own marriage. A cruel, silent theater I was never invited to watch, only star in, unknowingly. I sat back numb. How many holidays had they shared this secret across the dinner table? How many smiles, hugs, clinks of champagne glasses were soaked in this betrayal? And then it hit me. All those nights Michael came home later than usual. All the excuses, the evasive eyes, the sudden arguments when I asked about David. They weren't nothing. They were everything. I couldn't cry, not yet. The pain hadn't reached the surface, it lingered, dense and silent, like a storm waiting to break. My fingers trembled as I clicked through each email. A narrative unfolded before me. Their words weren't just confessions, they were poetry written in betrayal, paragraphs laced with longing, guilt, and a love neither of them had the decency to bury. What hurt the most wasn't the romance, it was the intimacy, the trust they had in each other, the secrets they kept together, secrets I thought belonged to me and Michael. Every detail they shared, every line that dripped with familiarity, was a reminder of how far I'd been pushed out of the circle of my own life. She'll never understand. We didn't mean for this to happen. I hate lying to her, but I can't lose you. One message caught me off guard. It was dated a few weeks ago. We can't keep doing this. It's destroying me. If Helen ever finds out, if she ever sees these messages, she'll never forgive either of us. I closed the laptop. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. It was like my body knew before my mind did. That nothing would be the same. After tonight, I walked to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. Who was I really? The loyal wife? The loving mother? The fool? There was a fire rising inside me, slow at first, but steady. For the first time since reading that note, I wasn't confused. I was angry. Not just at Michael. At David. At myself, for missing all the signs. For trusting so easily. For loving so deeply. And expecting that love to shield me from hurt. But most of all, I was angry that they made me feel small in my own story. That night, when Michael came home, I watched him enter as if I were watching a stranger walk into my house. He kissed my cheek. His lips were cold. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I just smiled. He sat down on the couch, asked about our daughter's school project, laughed at some news article. Meanwhile, I was planning my next move. I wasn't going to confront him, not yet. I needed more. People don't confess until you corner them with their truth. And when I did, I wanted there to be no escape. The next morning, Michael brewed my coffee. Just like he always did. Same mug, same sugar-to-milk ratio. Same smile that now felt like a blade pressed gently against my skin. He slid the cup toward me and said, "You looked tired last night. Are you okay?" The audacity, the sheer ease in his voice, it was surgical, practiced. I nodded, managing a half smile. Just a long day. Inside, I was screaming. Every word he spoke became a needle, stitching together a mask I had to wear to survive each minute. I'd become an actress in my own home, playing the role of a wife who wasn't unraveling. I decided that morning I would gather proof. Solid, undeniable proof. Not because I needed it. I already knew the truth. But because I needed to protect myself from the web of lies I was now entangled in. I backed up the emails, took screenshots, transferred them to a private flash drive I hid in a book cover in my office. I changed the password on my phone, started recording phone calls, documenting everything. Michael had meetings that week. Long, late ones. I pretended not to notice that his shirt smelled like someone else's perfume. I stopped asking why he wouldn't answer his phone on the first ring. Instead, I listened, watched, memorized, and then I invited David over. It wasn't a trap. Not entirely. It was a test. Michael's been so distracted lately, I told him casually as we sipped tea in the living room. Work stress, I think. David was stiff. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the sugar. He mentioned some things. He replied too quickly. I'm sure he'll come around. I smiled. Maybe. His eyes never met mine. For a man who'd once been like a brother to me, he now looked like someone I barely recognized. The moment he left, I cried. Not because I missed who we used to be, but because I finally accepted who we'd become. Michael and David weren't just having an affair. They were protecting each other, like soldiers in a foxhole, guarding the same secret with their lives. That night, I watched Michael sleep. I studied his peaceful face and wondered how many nights he'd slept next to me, while carrying her scent on his skin, how many mornings he'd kissed our daughter, while knowing he was building a life elsewhere. I didn't hate him, not yet. Hate is easy. I felt something more complicated. Contempt for his cowardice, for his dishonesty, for his ability to break us and act like nothing had changed. The days began blending together like smeared ink on a page, blurry, heavy and stained with silence. Michael continued being Michael, the loving husband, the doting father, the man who brought flowers home, just because, and kissed me on the forehead. Before heading off to late meetings, I became a detective in my own home. I noted every lie, every casual glance at his phone, every hushed call he took on the porch. I'd smile when he looked at me, laugh at his jokes, play the part of the oblivious wife he believed me to be. Inside, I was unraveling thread by thread. Our daughter, Sophie, started noticing. She asked me if I was sick. I told her I was just tired. It was true. I was exhausted of pretending, of playing house, of sleeping next to someone who had become a stranger wearing my husband's skin. Then one afternoon, everything changed. Michael had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. Something he never did. Maybe he got careless. Maybe he wanted to be caught. I didn't hesitate. I opened his email, and there it was, an entire thread of messages to a woman named Celia. Photos, voice notes, plans for a trip. Her name wasn't familiar. Not someone I knew. Not someone in our circle. She was younger, blonde. From the tone of their conversations, they'd been involved for months, maybe longer. One message stood out. I hate sleeping next to her. I feel nothing when I look at her now. You're the only real thing in my life, Celia. The screen blurred as my tears clouded the words. I wasn't surprised. But something about seeing it written, typed out, so deliberate, broke something inside me. It was no longer just a betrayal. It was erasure. He'd erased our marriage in his heart long before I found the messages. He was just playing a role now. That night I didn't confront him. I made dinner. I asked about his day. I listened as he lied to me with the ease of someone brushing lint off their jacket. And I decided something. This story wouldn't end with me shattered on the floor. No, it would end on my terms. So I started planning. Not revenge. Not yet. Truth. I'd show him what it felt like to be invisible, to be doubted, to sleep next to someone who already knew everything and said nothing. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's a storm-gathering strength. I began crafting the silence like a painter layering strokes on a canvas. Not empty silence. Calculated silence. The kind that echoes louder than words. I still kissed him goodnight. Still folded his shirts. Still listened to his fabricated stories about work and traffic and deadlines. But behind my eyes was a growing fire he couldn't see. I was collecting evidence piece by piece. Every email, every message, every receipt tucked into his wallet from dates I never attended. I created a digital archive of his deceit. It was almost surreal watching the life I thought was mine unravel in high-definition clarity. I didn't cry anymore, not because I wasn't hurting, but because the pain had transformed into something sharper, focused. Michael started noticing something was different. He asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. He reached for my hand more often, brought home my favorite wine. He even suggested we go on a weekend getaway, just the two of us. I smiled. Agreed. Played the role. But inside I was already gone. One evening, while he was in the shower, I sat in the living room scrolling through Celia's Instagram. Public. Open. Arrogant. Photos of her in expensive restaurants. A bracelet I'd seen before. Captions like, "Some people bring flowers. You bring peace." And then, one from 3 weeks ago. Counting down the days. Counting down to what? A weekend trip? A new life? Was he planning to leave me? It should have terrified me. But it didn't. Because I was already 10 steps ahead. I contacted a divorce lawyer. Quietly. I made copies of every financial document. I opened a private account. I began preparing for a life without him on my terms. And then came the night that changed everything. Michael was asleep. His phone buzzed at 2:13 a.m. I checked it. A message from Celia. "I'm ready whenever you are. I found a place. We can start over. Start over. With my husband. With the man I gave everything to. With the man who once said I was his home." I sat in the dark that night and made a decision. I would let him believe he still had control. Because some endings don't come with screaming or slamming doors. Some come with a whisper. And a plan. Michael suggested we take a weekend trip to the lake house. "Just us," he said, cupping my hand. "To reset things." He looked nervous when he said it. As if he knew something inside me had shifted. I smiled and nodded. "Sounds perfect," I replied. He didn't notice the way my hand tensed in his. The lake house had once been our sanctuary. Tucked between trees in silence, away from the world. We hadn't been there in over a year. The last time we made love on the porch as rain fell gently around us. I had believed that meant something. Now, it felt like a distant dream wrapped in lies. We arrived Friday evening. He unpacked the bags while I walked through the cabin. The air smelled like pine and memory. He cooked dinner. We drank wine. He lit candles. I watched him try to pretend. Pretend he wasn't slipping. I wondered if he was trying to convince me or himself. That night, we sat by the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket. Michael said, "I want to be better." I looked at him, heart steady. "Then start by being honest." He blinked. "What do you mean?" There it was. The denial. The act. The same expression I'd seen in the mirror for months, trying to hold a collapsing world together. "I know about Celia," I said calmly. His eyes widened. Silence. "I know about the dinners, the hotel receipts, the messages. I know you've been building a future without me." He looked down. The fire crackled. I didn't mean for it to happen, he whispered. It just happened, and then it kept happening. I stood, walked toward the window. The lake was still, dark, peaceful. I gave you everything, Michael, my youth, my time, my love, and in return you gave someone else your promises. He said nothing. I turned to him. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to let you go. His head snapped up. What? I already filed for divorce. The papers are with my lawyer. His mouth opened, but no words came. I needed this weekend. Not to fix us, but to say goodbye. He reached for me, but I stepped back. No more pretending, I said softly. I walked upstairs, closed the door, and for the first time in months, I slept without fear. We drove back on Sunday. The ride was silent, except for the soft hum of the engine and the occasional shuffle of Michael shifting in his seat. He tried to make small talk, but I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The trees passed in blurs of green and gold. Summer had begun to fade, and so had we. At one point, he reached for the radio. Music filled the car. A soft piano melody, one of our old songs. I turned it off. He didn't try again. When we got home, he parked in the driveway and sat with his hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. Are you really going through with it? He asked quietly. Yes, I answered. He nodded slowly, as if trying to absorb the weight of it all. I didn't think you'd actually leave me. I looked at him then. His face was tired, pale, hollow in the eyes. You left me a long time ago, Michael. You just didn't have the courage to say it out loud. I got out of the car and walked inside. The house still smelled like him. Like us. Like a version of me that no longer existed. I began packing what was left of my life there. Books, journals, the photo albums I couldn't bring myself to throw away just yet. I took down the wedding picture from the hallway. Stared at it for a moment. We looked happy, but it was a lie. Even then, I think I knew. He stood in the doorway. Where will you go? I zipped the suitcase shut. Somewhere that doesn't remind me of broken promises. I walked past him. He didn't stop me. Didn't beg. He just watched me go. Like someone watching a ship drift away from the shore. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. Outside, the air felt different. Sharper, free. As I drove to my sister's place, I thought about how endings don't always come with explosions. Sometimes they arrive in silence, in the soft closing of a door, in the moment you stop hoping they'll change. My sister welcomed me with open arms and tearful eyes. She didn't ask many questions, she never did. She simply handed me a warm blanket, a cup of tea, and said, "You're safe now." And in that moment, I realized how starved I had been for kindness. Her guest room was small but cozy. The bed creaked, the lamp flickered slightly, but it felt more like home than my actual house ever had. I sat on the bed, sipping my tea, and allowed myself to breathe. Really breathe, for what felt like the first time in years. The next morning, I started writing again. It had been months. I used to keep journals religiously, but somewhere along the line I had stopped. Stopped documenting my days. Stopped noticing the little things. Stopped caring. I picked up the pen and wrote, "I left my husband." Just that. 5 simple words, but they cracked something open inside me. That evening, Michael called. I didn't answer. He texted. Just one sentence. "I miss you." I stared at it. My fingers hovered above the screen, tempted to respond. But what could I say? What could possibly be said that hadn't already been drowned in the silence? Between us? A few days later, he sent a longer message. He told me he'd started therapy. That he realized how much he had hurt me. That he didn't expect forgiveness, but hoped someday I could look at him without pain in my eyes. I read it twice. 3 times. There was sincerity there. Maybe even remorse. But it didn't change what had happened. And it didn't change what I needed now. I needed peace. I needed space. I needed to remember who I was before I became someone else's second choice. I typed out a response. Deleted it. Typed it again. Eventually, I sent, "I'm glad you're getting help. But this isn't about you anymore. I need to heal." He didn't reply after that. And that silence, for once, felt merciful. I spent the next few days walking through the park behind my sister's house, watching the leaves shift from green to gold, listening to the wind, learning to be alone without feeling lonely. Forgiveness didn't come all at once. It never does. But in those quiet mornings with tea and journals and birdsong, I began to forgive. Not him, but myself. For staying too long. For hoping too much. For forgetting that I deserved more. One morning, as the sky wore its soft gray coat and the rain tapped gently against the window, I found myself writing again. But this time it wasn't for my journal. It was a letter. To Michael. A letter I never planned to send. I began it like this. Dear Michael, I don't hate you. I thought I might. I thought after everything that hatred would be easier to carry than heartbreak. But I don't. I just feel empty. I poured everything into that letter. I told him how it felt to find that message on his phone. How it rewrote every memory in my mind like a corrupted file. Our wedding, the nights he held me when I cried, the days he said, "You're the only one." I told him that the betrayal wasn't just about another woman, it was about the lies, the gaslighting, the emotional starvation. You didn't just cheat on me, I wrote. You erased me. I wrote about the moments I stared at myself in the mirror, wondering what I lacked. About the time I overheard him laughing at a joke someone else made one. I told him just the day before, and he hadn't even smiled. About the birthday he forgot. The promotion he didn't celebrate. The miscarriage he didn't grieve. Every moment was a thread, unraveling a marriage I had sewn together alone. And then I wrote about the silence, how it screamed louder than words ever could. How every time I tried to talk to him, he'd nod and look away, like he was waiting for the credits to roll. And still, somehow, I stayed. I stayed because I loved the version of him I met years ago. I stayed because I thought if I loved harder, he'd return to me. I stayed because I didn't know how to leave. Then I wrote the hardest part. I forgive you. Not because you asked, not because you deserve it, but because I cannot carry this with me anymore. It wasn't instant. It wasn't perfect. But in that moment, I let go of the weight that had lived on my chest for too long. I folded the letter, slid it into an envelope, and tucked it into the back of my journal. That evening I lit a candle. Not for ritual, not for revenge, for peace. I watched the flame flicker, listened to the rain, and whispered to myself, "You are free now." And for the first time in years, I believed it. The first night alone in the apartment was strange. Not in the way you expect when someone moves out boxes. Silence, the echo of their absence. It was strange because I had expected to feel devastated, but I didn't. I felt empty, yes, but also something I hadn't felt in years. Space. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet, maybe. But for once, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like possibility. I poured myself a glass of wine, not the one Michael liked, but the one I had always secretly preferred. I curled up on the couch with a blanket. I used to keep hidden in the closet because he thought it was too girly. I turned on a show he used to mock. I laughed. Out loud, it startled me. I almost looked around to apologize for the noise out of habit. But there was no one there. Just me and my laughter. There was a moment when I walked past our wedding photo still, hanging in the hallway. I stopped, looked at it. We looked so happy, so sure, so in love. But I could see it now behind my eyes in the photo. There was a flicker of doubt. A question I had never let surface. Did I know? Maybe. Did I ignore it? Absolutely. I took the photo down, gently. No rage, no drama, just acceptance. I placed it in a drawer, closed it, and stood there in the hallway for a long time. This was my life now. Uncharted, raw, real. That night I slept in the middle of the bed. I didn't cry. I didn't toss and turn. I simply slept. And when I woke up, the sun was peeking through the blinds, and I smiled. Not because everything was okay, but because it was mine. The day, the morning, the life, it was mine again. And in that fragile moment of stillness, I whispered to myself, "Welcome back." The days that followed were a delicate blend of liberation and disorientation. Everything in the apartment still whispered his name. His toothbrush still stood beside mine. His cologne lingered faintly on the jacket he left on the back of the chair. At first, I avoided those things. I would take a different towel from the closet, rather than use the one he always grabbed. I skipped the coffee mugs he favored. It was like I didn't want to wake the ghost of him. But over time, I started reclaiming the space not with anger, but with quiet defiance. I donated the shirts I never liked seeing him in, especially the ones he wore when he lied to me. I bought new bed sheets, deep navy blue, not the crisp white ones he insisted made the bedroom look more mature. I cooked meals that had too much garlic, the kind he always said made my breath unladylike. I ate every bite with a grin. It wasn't about erasing him. It was about reminding myself I was never just an accessory in this story. I was the author all along. There were still hard moments. Of course there were. One afternoon, while digging through a drawer for a charger, I found a love letter. Not one he wrote me, one I wrote him. Back when we were still dating. Still believing. Still unbroken. The words felt foreign. Desperate. Earnest in a way I no longer recognized. I sat on the floor and read it through. Twice. Once with nostalgia, once with grief. Then I folded it and placed it in a small box I labeled the past. Not to forget it, but to honor how far I'd come. In the evenings, I started journaling again. Something I hadn't done since college. My words were messy, unfiltered, raw, but they were mine. I wrote about loneliness and freedom, about fear and strength, about how it was possible to feel shattered and whole at the same time. I didn't share my writing. I didn't tell friends. This wasn't for them. It was for me, to stitch together the pieces of who I used to be and who I was becoming. That week, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself. Really looked. Not the woman Michael used to see. Not the version I had curated for social gatherings and family dinners. But me, raw, tired, beautiful, and I whispered again with more conviction this time. Welcome back. It was a Thursday morning when my phone rang, an unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. Normally I'd ignore it, but something made me answer. Hello? There was silence at first. Then a voice I hadn't heard in months. Michael's mother. Emily, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I froze. Not because I didn't want to hear from her, but because I didn't expect to. She'd always been kind to me. Warm. Not the interfering kind of mother-in-law you see in movies, but genuine and caring. We used to talk on the phone weekly about books, recipes, life, until everything collapsed. And she disappeared, just like the rest of his family. I just found out, she said softly, about what he did. About the affair. There was shame in her voice. And heartbreak. She explained that Michael had lied to her too. That he'd told his family we had simply grown apart. No mention of betrayal. No mention of secrets. No mention of her. I wanted to reach out sooner, she continued. But I didn't know how. And I didn't know the truth. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to hang up to protect what little piece I had rebuilt. But a deeper part of me, the part that once loved these people as my own, needed closure. We talked for over an hour, she cried. I didn't. Not because I was cold, but because I had no more tears left for Michael. Only for the years I lost believing in a life that was never fully mine. Before we hung up, she said, I just want you to know, you were never the problem. You were the best thing that ever happened to him, and I'm so sorry he couldn't see it. That stayed with me. Not because I needed the validation, but because it confirmed what I had suspected all along. Michael was broken long before he broke me. After the call, I sat by the window and watched the morning unfold. Birds darted between branches. The sky was soft with early light. The world was still turning, still beautiful even after the storm. That evening, I took a walk through the park near my apartment, the same one I used to avoid because it reminded me of our Sunday routines, coffee in hand. Hand in hand. But this time I walked it alone. And it felt different. Not empty. Just new. I stopped at a bench and watched a young couple laugh over spilled ice cream. I didn't feel bitterness. I felt something else. Something lighter. Maybe it was forgiveness. Not for Michael, but for myself. For staying too long. For loving too hard. For not seeing the signs. I whispered a quiet thank you to the wind. Not because I was grateful for the pain, but because without it, I wouldn't be here breathing easier, standing taller. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because of nightmares or anxiety, those had faded weeks ago. It was something else. A thought. A whisper in the back of my mind that refused to quiet. What would you say if you could say anything at all? So I got out of bed, pulled a blank page from my journal, and began to write. To Michael. Not to send it, not for him. But for me, for closure. Dear Michael, you probably won't ever read this. And even if you did, I don't think you'd fully understand. But I need to write this for myself. Not for you. When we met, I believed in the kind of love that could fix anything. I thought I was lucky, blessed to find someone like you. You made me laugh. You listened. You made promises. But beneath it all there were cracks. Small at first. So small I thought they didn't matter. You forgot anniversaries. You grew distant. You stopped asking about my day. And when I finally confronted the truth, it wasn't just betrayal I found. It was a stranger in your place. I replayed everything. Every touch, every kiss, every I love you. Was any of it real? I'll never know. But here's what I do know. I lost myself trying to keep us together. I bent until I almost broke. I blamed myself for your distance. I begged for scraps of love when I deserved the whole meal. And when you left, not just physically, but emotionally, I thought I'd never find solid ground again. But I did, without you. I learned to laugh alone. I found joy in silence. I forgave myself. So no, this isn't a letter to shame you. Or to ask why. It's a goodbye. Goodbye to the version of me that needed your love to feel whole. Goodbye to the dreams we built on sand. I wish you healing. I wish myself peace. And most of all, I'm free now. When I finished, I folded the paper and placed it in a drawer. I didn't burn it. I didn't rip it to pieces. I let it live quietly, like the echo of something I survived. There was power in those words. Not because they were eloquent or sharp, but because they were mine. They were true. The next morning I woke up feeling lighter, like something invisible had been lifted off my chest. The sun poured in through the curtains. I made coffee. I played my favorite song without flinching at the memories it used to bring. And in that moment I realized healing isn't a single event. It's a series of choices. Tiny, brave, beautiful choices. To stay, to fight, to let go. And I was doing all three. One page at a time. A week later I stood in front of the mirror, dressed in a deep green blouse and jeans that finally felt like they belonged to someone confident. Not someone pretending to be okay. Someone becoming okay. It wasn't just the clothes, it was the way I stood. My shoulders weren't weighed down anymore. My eyes didn't search for sadness in their own reflection. I was present, and more than that, I was proud. It was on that particular Thursday that I received an unexpected message. A name I hadn't seen in months blinked on my phone screen. Claire, Michael's sister. My heart skipped. Not out of fear, but reflex. She said she wanted to meet. She wrote, not to talk about him. Just you, if you're okay with that. Part of me hesitated. Why now? But something inside said yes. We met at a small cafe. One I'd been to many times before, always with Michael. But this time, I walked in alone, chin up, chest open. Claire stood and smiled. It wasn't the tight-lipped smile of someone guarding secrets. It was the smile of someone carrying guilt, perhaps, but also kindness. We sat. We talked. She didn't apologize for her brother, she didn't need to, but she told me in soft, sincere words, "You didn't deserve any of what happened. You were always too good to him." I nodded. It felt strange to hear it out loud, but healing, I've learned, often comes from strange places. When we left the cafe, she hugged me. A long, human, wordless embrace, and I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at her. Not at him. Not even at myself. That night, I walked home through the city, lights flickering around me like stars that had fallen to earth. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't haunted by memories. I was comforted by them because I had survived, because I had learned, because I had loved even if the love wasn't returned the way I deserved. And now, I was loving myself. I lit a candle when I got home, played soft music, sat on the floor with a glass of wine, and whispered thank yous to the woman I had become, a woman who had faced betrayal and didn't let it define her, a woman who dared to rebuild, who dared to be seen again. As I looked out the window watching the breeze ripple the trees, I thought, maybe healing isn't about erasing the past. Maybe it's about making peace with it, letting it walk beside you but no longer ahead. That night I didn't cry. I didn't ache. I simply exhaled, because the story didn't end with heartbreak. It ended with me, and I was finally beautifully free.